Hello, church. My name is Dave Johnson. I'm the lead pastor of a church called Neighborhood Christian Fellowship in Covina, California. A number of years ago, I had what I would call a paradigm shattering experience. And that was, I saw the world one way, and then I walked through an airport with my friend Troy. Troy and I walked through this airport, and after we got out of security, we were well past security, he was stopped and frisked. Troy's a black pastor in Oakland, California. And what's most upsetting, I think, about this experience is that he told me that this is just something that happens on a normal basis. This is just something that happened to him, and he's kind of gotten used to it. That was really upsetting to me because that has never happened to me. So as I experienced this through his shoes, I wanted to do something in our current climate right now in our country to help you get some much needed context on what was happening. What is a black pastor's perspective on what is happening in the world right now? What is a black pastor's perspective on things like systemic racism, on things like Black Lives Matter, and on other things like this? So I did a series of 4 interviews. And these interviews are for you, the church, to give us all context on the way that African Americans are treated in this country and to help us understand how to move forward. This is not a series of videos designed for a political purpose. I really honestly couldn't care less about that. So if you're here for a political debate, that is just not at all what the intention of these videos are for. They're for learning, for listening, for walking a mile in the shoes of somebody else, and for helping the church to really be the church. So church, I want to just invite you to listen and learn in this time. Because I think as we listen and learn, we can move towards that calling of the church to be united in the love of Jesus Christ together. Thank you for watching these videos. Welcome. I want to introduce you to my friend Anthony Powell. Anthony, give us a quick introduction of yourself.
Hey, I'm Anthony. I lead a church in Azusa, California called Redeemed Life Church with my beautiful wife, Bonnie. We have 3 kids, little Anthony, Alana, and Leilani, all 14 years old. They are triplets. It is the wonderful way that God likes to laugh at me. But he's got a great sense of humor, but we love it. We love our kids. Really found the Azusa area via Azusa Pacific University. So love the school that we get to be a part of. And really, once I got here, figured I might as well not leave. I might as well just hang out a little bit. But prior to planting Redeemed Life Church in Azusa, I was on staff at a large church in Los Angeles where my wife and I led and served there for 15 years as associate pastors with that team before being called to Azusa to plant.
That's awesome. And Azusa is where you and I met. We met a little bit before the grant team, but then you and I got on a grant team together that explored the intersection of healing racial pain or dealing with racial pain through using the biblical practices of lament. And so you and I have been on that team for 2 years now, going on year 3, 2.5, I think. It's been a long time.
It's been a minute.
Yeah. So, man, thanks you so much for talking to me today. Basically, what I wanted to do, I've had so many Facebook conversations, so many just conversations surrounding race lately. And one of the things that I've noticed from people who are generally white is that they don't understand that there's a different experience for people who are black in America. And I wanted to ask you about that. I wanted to ask you, do you think that that's true? That's kind of my basic premise.
Yeah. Well, I just got to applaud you and honor you. This is the man of God that I know you to be, but being willing to kind of dive into these deep waters, as many conversations I've been having are being had right now because of what's going on in our globe and in our nation. But I still don't take it lightly that you would invite me into this space with you and that we engage in this kind of conversation. I always like to start by just saying, I'm going to speak for me, from my experience, and I in no way speak on behalf of all black people.
Right. And just as I in no way speak on behalf of all white people.
Yes, but I can speak from the heart of my experience. And I would ask that those that are listening, that are watching, would just take that into consideration. And also just being real, we're engaging into what I would say and we discovered this in our time together, going through this research grant. I remember we spent a portion of our time just as a team getting together, identifying what is a space to have a conversation with. And we threw around words like, let's create a safe space. And I love where we kind of landed, which is like, let's create a brave space, because knowing that we get into this conversation, it's not safe. It's not safe. I realize that even as I open my mouth right now, I'm being judged, misunderstood, misinterpreted. People are viewing me through their own filter, their own understanding. And so just kind of acknowledging that, as I share and as you share, like we're realizing that is something that we are taking on, and we understand that, but we're going to engage regardless.
My son just walked in. He's like, Mom, I don't know if you heard. But yes, no, that notion of creating a brave space, not being we're going to all be safe, because you're absolutely right. The reality is there is nothing safe about this conversation. And as you begin entering into these conversations, like, people get genuinely mad. And I've had people very upset at me. I've had my own emotions flared up on this. And this is just a highly volatile, emotional thing. But see, I could get mad, but the reality is you live it, right? Mm-hmm. Like, this is your life that we're talking about. And this is like, you have walked through the trenches on this. So share with us, in the tone of being a brave space, share with us, be brave, man. Share your experiences.
Yeah. So what I've come to live out, realize for myself, starting from a young boy, growing up in the dominant white culture, is that the color of my skin made an impact of how people viewed me or saw me. I remember being a young kid and realizing that when I did things that received kind of applause or accolades, growing up in Southern California, depending on my father, just a little bit quick background, my father was in the Marine Corps, so we traveled around the world. So came from a very diverse background, lived everywhere from Okinawa, Japan to Hawaii, to North Carolina, to family in Texas, to all over the place. And when I found myself in atmospheres where being Black was the minority, that there are some assumptions made for me, even as a young boy. I remember being told, like, if I was speaking in a way that was articulate, like, wow, like, you are really articulate for a young man your age. And someone might say, like, well, maybe you were just articulate for a young man your age. What does that have to do with race? It usually came right off the handles of speaking to a person not of color, and sharing whatever was going on in the day, and kids that were just as articulate as me were speaking and speaking and speaking. And then when it came to me, a posture change I noticed as a kid. They kind of just got down and was like, their speech pattern would slow down. They would look for more like visual affirmations that I was tracking with them. And when I began to speak in the same way that the children before me had spoke, they didn't get, you are so articulate, but I got a, wow, like, look at you.
Oh my goodness.
And it came from people that loved God and that loved me. Like, it wasn't from a sense of we were trying to be demeaning or talking down, but just out of a sense, like, I've already made some decisions in my mind of what I should expect from you based on your skin color. Then that began to get a little bit more alarming and abrupt as I got older, especially as I got into my teenage years. I saw that it really switched to the sheer fact that I was in a room caused people to be alarmed, caused people to guard their safety, if you will. That in a way that I was just like, what is going on? From walking through a crowded parking lot in a grocery store and hearing doorknobs click down or locks, oh, okay, being seen as a threat, to the things that we often hear about with that men of color experience, that Black men experience, to being followed in stores, to being questioned in ways that I'm like, where is this coming from? Things that are, honestly, I began to be a little bit passive to, in the sense like, okay, acceptance started to seep in. This is just what it is. This is just how it is. to things that were a little bit more in my face, like, okay, this has to do with blatant racism. I remember walking home with my brothers. I'm the youngest of three. Walking home from school and being trailed by a police officer, and then finally pulled over, and they said, "Hey, you guys are loitering. You need to get where you're going. You can't be hanging out. I don't know what gang activity you're up to." To which we began to explain, we're walking home from school. We're brothers. To which he told us, well, we're going to follow you home to check out and make sure that the story is real. And just so you know, we've been instructed where there are more than two Black males walking together, that is considered a gang. So I'm going to ask one of you to walk on the opposite side of the street while we follow you home. And we did. We walked the rest of the way home. My oldest brother chose to walk on the other side of the street. So the two younger ones, me and my middle brother, got home, knocked on the door, and to which my mom answered, is everything okay? And to him to tell her, oh, we just wanted to make sure that, are they brothers?
Wow.
Which my mom was furious. And so she began to say, so are you telling me that my sons are not allowed to walk home together? And to which he said, hey, ma'am, I'm just saying I can't promise this won't happen again.
Wow. And just one of the things we discovered in our grant is that the history of the Black body being criminalized is a long history in our country, and is something that, like, when you mentioned those door locks clicking, like, I've been in bad parts of town where I'm sure I've done that. Like, just to be honest with you, like, I'm sure that was me at one point, you know, and it's just deeply seated in our, I don't know if it's like a historical memory. I don't even know if that's a thing, but it's just deeply seated within us as a human culture, really, that, like, the Black body is a criminal body. And to hear you explain that, and to hear you talk about how you've not just explained it, but experienced that even now, even today, I mean, that's powerful, man.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that you've had to go through that.
And Dave, in all honesty, like, it's so, I believe it's so ingrained in our culture that even as a Black man, some of those very thoughts and fears about seeing other Black men as a possible threat have been things that have raced through my mind. I mean, I'm Black, I get it. And I found myself in situations where I could see another brother coming towards me, and I'll feel my pulse race again. And like, what's going on? And then I have to sit there in my own mind saying, there is nothing to be alarmed here.
Right.
But because of the images, because of the ways that people of color have been portrayed, my mind has been trained to think threat. Again, I'm only speaking for myself. To the point where I realize that this is a problem that is very deep-rooted and very deep-seated. But to act as if it's not so doesn't make it so.
Yeah, and that's, you know, there's a lot of fragility surrounding this conversation. Like, I think that's where the anger comes up. You begin to speak about this, and all of a sudden it's, I'm not a racist, and I have a Black friend, and I, you know, I'm good. I'm one of the good ones, you know, and it almost just shuts the conversation down. But what I think we really need are people like you just simply sharing their story. Like, people need to hear that this stuff happens today, and that you're experiencing this, how it makes you feel, all that stuff. I hate to, like, tell you where to go with your stories or anything like that, but you told a story once that was very powerful in my mind, and it was a story in a flower shop. And I'm wondering if you might be willing to share that story with us.
No, absolutely. It was a very unique time in the sense that I was pretty new to the area. Again, being a church planter and planting here, and being very excited about being a part of this community. And it was at this point where, as the story goes, I have 3 kids, 2 daughters, and it was their very first father-daughter dance. So if anybody knows anything about me, like, I kind of geek out. I'm a little extra. I'm that dude. I'm that
yeah,
dad.
just follow you on Instagram, and we'll find that out.
I'm the guy that wants to embarrass my kids on social media at every opportunity.
Praise the Lord, man, embarrass them.
Let's do it. But so I've been making a big deal about this. This is my opportunity to spend time with my girls, to make them feel like a princess. So I'm going all out. Like mom is taking them downtown to buy the biggest, poofiest dress they could find. We wanted them to feel like a princess. So she's taking them to even get a crown that they could place on their head because it's a formal affair. I'm making sure that I have my suit all pressed, all ironed, ready to go. I even went the extra mile and I was going to rent a limo. Because we never rented in a limo before. So I rented a limo so that I could pick up my girls and be like, Daddy's taking you out on your first kind of formal date, if you will. And as a father, I'm like, my goal is to spoil them for every other man that would try to step to my girls. So
I got 2 girls. Amen.
Right? It's like, it's my job. It's the right I have as a dad. So there's a lot of anticipation coming to this day. So I had gone to the gym, and on my way back to the gym to get showered up and get cleaned up and to pick up my girls, I was like, oh, I want to buy them a corsage, a simple corsage. Like, let's do this right. Let's be the gentleman that I am. And so I stopped at a flower shop in Glendora. And as I walk into this flower shop, mind you, I just came from the gym. So I have shorts, tennis shoes, cut off shirt, dreadlocks hanging down. I'm sure looking a little out of place and disheveled, if you will, because I just came from the gym, from a workout. And I emptied this flower shop that was pretty relatively empty at the time. There was one customer in front that was being helped, and the level of care that this customer was given was exciting to me. I mean, the person at the counter, she was a white female, was taking a great deal of care of this person. They were caring for this person, taking their time with the person. They had questions, walking around the flower shop. What kind of arrangement do you want? Like, completely rolling out the red carpet. Lots of familiarity and candor being created as she was helping this customer. Anyway, the customer finishes and they leave, and it's just me in the flower shop. And as I began to step forward to say, hey, I'm excited to tell, I'm about to buy a corsage for my 2 girls, the demeanor of this lady completely changes. It's almost as if she could barely make eye contact with me. In fact, when she looks up to address me, it's as if she thinks I'm mistakenly there. It is not of like, how can I help you? But it comes to a very apparent, like, can I help you? As if I'm
you know where you are, like, are you lost?
Yes. Why would you possibly be here?
Right.
To which I began to explain, hey, it's a father-daughter dance. I'm being myself. I'm a pretty jovial guy. I'm trying to engage in conversation with her and saying, hey, so it's like my first time, never picked out a corsage for them before. They're 12 years old, telling them the story. Like, so I would love your help in figuring out what I could get for my girls. To which she responds, how would I know what they would like? Do you have any idea? Can you, like, what are the things that I wouldn't even know where to begin to help you figure out what your girls needed. To which I was visibly, I'm sure, taken back. Like, okay, well, can you tell me what you might have in terms of a corsage? And she really just cuts me off mid-sentence and says, well, actually, the way that works is you actually have to call that in. We don't just kind of make that on the spot. That's more of a special order. And I'm really busy. I've got a lot going on here. Mind you, there's nobody else in the store. And you know what? And then she says, yeah, I think you probably better off. There's a Vons across the way. They have a flower shop or a floral department. Maybe they could possibly help you because there's really nothing. When do you need it? I was like, well, it's tonight. Oh, and you need it right now? Yeah, that's not how this works. Very condescending.
And it could just be that, like, well, I mean, had you walked in there and there had not been another customer, you could have just been like, well, I'm just a dude and I don't know anything about flowers. And, you know, but like to have such a stark comparison of the person before you getting the red carpet service and then you walking in there and it's just sort of the brush off, you know, like I wonder if people even, I mean, you got to think they know they're doing that, but I wonder if they even pick up on it cognitively that they are doing this.
Yeah, I tend to be the kind of person that wants to give people the benefit of the doubt. Like,
me too. I always want to be like, oh no, you're great.
Yeah, maybe they're having a rough day. Maybe they just had a bad. I'm not sure. So I keep that kind of in mind as I'm figuring out how to respond, because I knew in that moment there are two responses. One was, did I want to call her out on it?
Yeah.
Did I want to get angry and like play into the stereotype? Not that it's a play, but understanding how it could be perceived as if I share my displeasure, I become the angry black man.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I become the person that escalates it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and in that moment, and I'm a God-fearing man. I love God and I love God's people.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that moment, I chose to say, thank you for your time. Turn around and walk out.
Take it on the chin, huh?
Take it on, because also like I was like, I got a dance to go to, and I didn't want this lingering around in my heart. But the biggest thing I take from that story is there's a couple tragedies that happened that day. One is the treatment that I was given that was unfair and unjust.
Yeah.
At least according to my perception from where I was standing. The second is I never got to give my girls those corsages.
Yeah.
So without them even knowing, they became a victim of systematic racism based on what they were not able to get, but because their dad was not able to do that for them, because I was on a time constraint and I didn't have time to go through that, nor the energy, the emotional, mental health to go through another moment of disappointment. So I just went home. And that broke my heart. Like, Dad, like, man, like you can do that to me, but now you're doing that to my kids. My kids are on the negative end of this treatment. Like, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah. And I guess as a dad, I mean, you hope that your kids are getting different treatment at school and different treatment, like they're not experiencing what you've had to experience, but you know, just where are your kids at? Like, I mean, are they experiencing this the same level you're experiencing this? And how does that work for you just as a dad?
Yeah, man, can I first say how resilient kids are? And I have the greatest level of hope rise in me when I start thinking about the generation that is coming up. I'm committed to doing my best to lead in a way that they would inherit a better world, but I'm quite confident that the world that they are going to lead is going to be a better one than the one we're experiencing right now. So I'll get off my soapbox with that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, my kids, I mean, they go to a school in Glendora, and there's not a whole lot of diversity at the school, especially in terms of Black kids. I mean, we have those conversations. I remember going to a award ceremony where my kids were then. I looked at an auditorium full of, at that time, maybe about 400, 500 students and parents, and we were the only Black family.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily an indictment on anyone. I think the community reflects the community that you're in. So we realize that we're in a community where there's not a lot of Black families. We knew that moving into it. I don't hold that against Glendora or Azusa, the place that we live. But that being said, like, they notice their difference and they're otherized in some ways that they don't even realize that I'm aware of. When you know, my girls get, you know, a new hairstyle or something, and they walk on campus and I see them swarmed by their friends with everyone wanting to touch their hair, which my kids are like, yeah, whatever, I don't care. But I know, like, that's, you know, they're being otherized. They're being seen as different. And kids are kids. Again, kids love kids. They're not even seeing it that way. Little things like that too. When it comes to them interacting with their friends and sharing culture and engaging in those ways, they're often having to teach some of their friends a lot more about, it's just the culture and the family they come from. And again, that's great. That's a privilege. I don't consider that to be a problem. But there are also moments where I find them defending their perceived lack of Blackness, which can be troubling to me. When you hear them say little comments and when they're talking with their friends and all this stuff that is going on in media, and I hear the comments of like, yeah, but you know, we don't even see, like, you don't walk like that, talk like that, act like that. You don't even act Black. And where I want to say, like, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
Act Black.
It's almost like what happened to you. Like you speak so well, you know, like it's almost that same feeling behind it.
Yes. Or some people will feel like they have a more affinity to the Black culture in what they perceive as a positive way than someone who's not Black. So it can be like, hey man, I listen to hip hop. Like I wear the swag that I see on TV. Man, I'm blacker than you are. Like, what? Like,
Oh,
is that what you think? It's something that you could put on versus something that you walk in and live with.
right.
And it's a gift from God, as your whiteness is a gift from the Creator, so is my blackness. It's not.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Um, but so with recently, with all that's been going on in the media, we've had to engage in different conversations, and saying like, how is that impacting them? And I've seen them become, in the last 3 months, way more aware of the racial disparity than ever before.
Yeah.
Where I see them scratching their heads and saying, wait, are you saying that this is happening because they're Black? And I've seen them, as they've grown up, start to figure out where they fit in that. We are a biracial household. My wife's Mexican Italian and I'm Black. So I saw from kids, it was like, hey, mommy's white, daddy, we're brown and daddy's Black. And so my wife was always like, hey, I love that you see colors, but I'm Latina, I'm not necessarily white. Let's figure our place in the world. But see them now, like seeing that as a beautiful thing, to now being like, Dad, like, so even though I'm half Black, I'm seen as Black if I'm my 14-year-old son. Will you prepare me for the world?
Yeah.
And how the world will perceive me? And
Right.
happy to have those conversations about whether it's, you know, if you're pulled over on the highway, son, hands out the window immediately, speak, look them in the eye. If it's unfair, that's not a time to debate. Your life is at stake. I really want you just to be as cooperative as possible, knowing that after the fact, get to a safe place, then we can come and look into the situation and talk about what if your rights have been violated. But in the moment is not to do it. And I think about conversations like that, and I can't help but think, like, is that a conversation that my white friends have to have with their white sons? Do they have to?
My son's 70, he's not driving yet, but I don't think I'm going to have that conversation with my kids. I mean, be respectful,
Yeah.
obviously. Don't make a cop wonder. Don't,
Yeah.
stuff like that. But like, to the level of what you just said, no, absolutely not.
And for them to balance that out with, we have a wonderful relationship as a church in Azusa with our Azusa PD. Like when they had their just turned 14, we had a drive-by parade, and the fire department and the police department came out. Like, they see them as people that are there that have sworn an oath to protect and serve them. And that's the way that they've seen them for their entire life. And then as a Black man, I still see them that way. We have family in law enforcement. We have people in our church in law enforcement. They are not the enemy.
Right.
But also know that you're Black.
Mm-hmm.
And that you are going to be perceived a certain way, and I need you to be safe. And
Well,
like, those are troubling conversations I have to have.
I don't mean to cut you off. You did bring up the whole pullover conversation. I'm just curious, do you have a number? Like, are you a guy that's pulled over more frequently than other people? I mean, I don't know how to qualify all that.
Yeah, right. No, I hear where you're leading. And here's where I'm always trying to be careful when I have these kind of conversations, and so that people can hear a conversation like this and know that I'm committed to not putting anything on it. Meaning, when I share my stories of my perception of racial injustice happening to me, I'm careful to not exaggerate. I'm careful to just lay out the facts, because I also want to make sure that I'm trying to check my own biases, even based on the history that I've experienced growing up as a Black man in America. All that to be said, I can tell you with where I'm at right now, and living in the San Gabriel Valley, I've only been pulled over once. No, that's not true. I've been pulled over twice. One of them was a great experience. One of them was not. So in terms of what I see that as, like, how do I kind of compare that to other people's experience? It's hard for me to tell. I can tell you in both experiences, I didn't feel like it was necessarily warranted. I felt like in many ways I was being trailed. I was being, dare I say, profiled. but I felt like the one of them, which I was just pulled over as I was coming out of a stop sign, and it was something as simple as my lights weren't on, and I was like, okay, legitimately they weren't on. I don't know if how often people that aren't black get pulled over for their lights not being on, but he kind of ran like I do the kind of routine that I do, and I'm speaking very respectfully and very honorably, and I saw the demeanor shift as he began to talk to me more. I felt like maybe something happened in the neighborhood, maybe they were concerned that I was involved with it, and then once he realized like I really wasn't, and the giveaway I think for him as we got into a conversation, it came up that I'm a pastor, that I was heading home from my church office. I saw it like, oh, almost as if like, you can't be the guy, so I'm gonna let you go.
Well, and police officers legitimately do go out there. They put their lives on the line every day, and every stop is different for them. And
Yep.
you know, we've got police officers in our church. I get the drill. It's a scary job. So
Yeah, and these guys are trying to get home to their families.
yeah,
And I need them to get home because I need them in their job protecting and serving. They have a valued place in the community.
Mm-hmm.
So we have that, and then we have that the kind where they're pulling me over, they're reading me the riot. I'm being as cooperative as possible, and they're not trying to hear it, trying to have it. And so it's hard for me to, and that has happened in Glendora when they said I didn't fully stop at a stop sign, and which I was like, I'm pretty sure I did, but
yeah.
and he didn't treat me very nicely, ended up letting me go. It didn't end up in another altercation. But I got a ticket.
Yeah.
And I did my civil duty.
I mean, these are just personal experiences. So obviously, it's hard to look at all of these things in a qualitative way. But you know, Stanford actually just came out with a study that looked at every single like ticket from the last like 20 years or something like that, and they were able to like categorize them, and the rate of Latino and African American people getting ticketed for pullovers was so much higher than white people. And Stanford just put this out. I'll have to look into it, but
Wow.
just interesting case. Well, we talked a little bit about police. We talked a little bit about this, and the question that I have, and I get asked from time to time, is, do you support Black Lives Matter? And they ask me this. So we're shifting gears a little bit. And I'm curious what you think of the phrase. I'm curious what you think of all this. And I'd be glad to show my hand too, but I'm just kind of
absolutely. Absolutely. And this is a topic that has come up often in our church too. You know the demographics of my church. It's a very multiracial, multicultural, multi-ethnic, meaning like 20% Black, 20% white, 20% brown, if I'm just giving kind of some basic demographics. So this question has come up a lot. And I just want to say, like, when I engage in these kind of conversations, especially about the Black Lives Matter, I've encouraged those within my congregation, especially people that aren't Black, to feel like they can ask any question of me and know that I will not deem them a racist.
Right.
So I've said, let's take that word off the table, because if that is a fear that you have, you could have a very good, sincere question about how to care for me as a Black man, and fear that you can't ask it because once that label is on, you feel like it's one that you can't shake off. And who wants to be called a racist as a child of God who's trying to care for somebody else? So I just kind of put that out there as I encourage them to ask me questions. And I did have people that love me that are saying, hey, Pastor, I'm white. What's wrong with saying all lives matter? Like, can I ask you that without being like pummeled, like, how dare you not know? Right. You're not woke enough. And I'm like, please ask that question. It's a legitimate question, and I can understand why you'd want to ask it. So let me kind of give you some backstory in terms of how I feel about the Black Lives Matter movement. I will admittedly say I don't know all the nuances of the movement in terms of the actual organization that started it. What I've been a part of is seeing a nation, particularly a world actually, grab a hold of this statement. And in my opinion, my assessment, for me, it's become more than a movement. It's actually become a cry of lament. It's actually become like a prayer and a petition. So when I say Black Lives Matter, and I have publicly, I'm not necessarily, and this is perhaps where I need to get more woke. that I don't feel like that statement is saying that I'm aligning myself with everything that the actual movement stands for, because that's what I don't see playing out in culture. I see when people are writing, saying hashtag Black Lives Matter, and they're talking about that. I don't see that they're saying like every particular that is associated with the movement I'm in agreement with, but I'm in agreement with the statement that Black Lives Matter. And I am absolutely in agreement with the statement that Black Lives Matter, because my life matters. In no way when I say that do I feel like I'm saying my life matters more than anybody else's life.
Yeah.
But as a Black man, I can tell you, when someone's saying all lives matter, I would say, I agree with you. But if Black lives don't matter, then how can all lives matter?
Right.
Because what's being played out in our culture is that my life doesn't matter. So when you say all lives matter, I'm like, not unless we can agree that Black lives matter. And what we're seeing as men are being murdered on the street, not just by law enforcement, but by vigilante people who feel like they want justice, the people that feel threatened by Black bodies.
Yeah, people who are standing their ground, you know.
Yes.
By standing their ground by chasing joggers, right? Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, exactly. Like, no, we're not saying that Black lives matter. So to say that is not trying to pull down another ethnic group. It's saying, hey, we live in a neighborhood together. And you may have heard this analogy. I've heard it and I think it's beautiful. We're living in a neighborhood together and my neighbor's house is on fire. If I go put out that house that's clearly on fire and about to be doomed to destruction, it doesn't mean that the neighbor whose house isn't on fire and saying, hey, well, what, doesn't my house matter? Why aren't you protecting my house right now? Because your house isn't on fire.
Right. Right.
House is. Can we put out, I'm not saying that your house doesn't matter. If your house catches fire, your house matters. Right now, your house is not on fire. This house is the one that we need to give the attention to. And what the Black community is crying out and saying, my life matters, we're on fire. Does anyone notice? And when someone cries out, yeah, but my house matters too, and it's not on fire, it's almost like, okay.
Yeah.
But can we acknowledge that I'm the one in jeopardy?
Wow. It's such a powerful analogy. I mean, I heard it with the rainforest, you know, last year, like the Brazilian rainforest was on fire and people were focusing on that and tweeting and all this on it. Nobody was saying the Pacific Northwest is unimportant, or, you know, that the jungles in Africa were just irrelevant. No one was saying that, you know? And so I'm a lot like you. It's like, yeah, you see this community that's hurting, and that clearly, like, I think, you know me, I always bring up history, and history is so powerful for me. I see my kids learn about Martin Luther King, and somehow implicitly in the lesson, Martin Luther King solved racism, right? But the man was shot in the head, okay? He was assassinated in the streets and cheered for it. Like, he was hated back then. The FBI was, you know, like, on him. You know, so like we for whatever reason, the white community that gets all upset at the Black Lives Matters phrase, they hear this and they think, well, Martin Luther King and this and that, like, we solved this. And I just want to scream, like, no, like, King was assassinated, dude. Yeah. You know, like, he was killed in the streets, and then that was even celebrated in some groups. Like, come on, we have not solved this. And the reality is that is that you, not me, you experience this day after day after day. Your entire life you've experienced, whether it is racism that people are aware of or that they're unaware of, that they don't even know they're doing it. And, you know, as a white person, I get to, like, look in on this world, right? I don't get to experience this world. So it's really important to hear this. I'm with you, though. It's like the Black Lives Matter organization is not a Christian organization. Like, the stuff they say, I'm like, you know, they're anti-police, they're defund police. And just from that level, it's like, man, that's not something that I agree with, but I could get behind, like, your analogy, like what you just said, like, this house is on fire, we got to put the fire out. It doesn't mean we hate other houses. You know,
Right.
I think other houses are irrelevant. It means that this house matters.
And I think what I'm finding, especially with the Black Lives Matter movement, people are having a hard time holding contradictory views kind of like in the same category and being okay with it. Meaning, if I say Black Lives Matter phrase, it's been so politicized that me just saying Black Lives Matter somehow means that I do believe in defunding the police, that I don't think Blue Lives Matter or whatever that is. And again, I can only speak for myself. I don't look at them and I don't look at the phrase in the same way. I think it has eclipsed a movement from a secular organization. And I'm not trying to say anything disparaging about the organization at all. I'll admittedly admit, I don't know all the intricacies of what Black Lives Matters is for and against in every situation. I don't. I'm generally aware, but I don't. But I don't think when somebody says Black Lives Matter that I automatically mean like that means you don't support law enforcement. Like I don't make that jump, and I think other people do. And so I don't know what to say to that. But for me, I don't make that jump. When someone says Black Lives Matter, I look at that phrase as supporting what that phrase is dictating or is saying.
Yeah, and I think that really speaks to the polarization of our world. Like you've been in church ministry long enough, you know, you stand up in front of somebody and say something and people immediately or just online, they just immediately polarize, right? And that's what they've done over this phrase is, you know, it's like, well, let's go to the most extreme ends and let's fight, you know. It's just crazy.
Which is what makes this, I find myself saying this all the time, like racism is evil. Like it's demonic.
Can we just, as a church, can we just all agree that racism is demonic, you know?
We are not battling against flesh and blood. It is evil and demonic. And to weigh into this conversation, which is what makes it so brave, you are going to not, I am a Black man, and I've gotten more disparaging emails because I posted a picture of me with the Azusa PD saying that I love these guys. I know them personally. I thank you for the good job that you're doing. And I got belittled by my own race saying, hey man, why are you taking away from the main issue? Like it's not about that. To some cops are bad, all cops are bad. Oh, great. But do you feel safe when they pull you over? Easy for you to where I'm like, whoa.
Yeah.
Here's what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that those that have done some profound injustices shouldn't be held accountable for that injustice. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is these men and women are putting their lives on the line and that they have families to get home to too. And I'm not about to lump them in the category with what 4 men did to George Floyd and took his life, nor would I want you to say, because I'm Black, I'm a criminal. If one Black guy's a criminal, we're all criminals. I'm not saying because of one officer's or 4 officers, poor, horrific, tragic, unjust, and this is me showing my bias, decision that means every cop is bad. I'm not going to do that. I don't see that in the life of my Jesus. I don't see him doing that. Right. And so posting a picture in the midst of all the hate, I'm like, that sounds like something my God would do. He didn't wait till he ascended to heaven to say, Father, when he was hanging on the cross, forgive them for they know not what they're doing. He said it while the crown of thorns was on his head, while the wounds on his back were still fresh. He still said, in this extreme act of hate, I'm going to show you an act of love, because that's what love does.
Gambling for his clothes.
Yes. So I'm like, I get it. I get that people are very passionate about this issue. I think the way that we respond to the evil, the demonic nature of racism, we need to look to scripture and look to the Bible as to how we respond to hate and not look to the world. Like people think when I say Black Lives Matter that all of a sudden I'm for looting. I'm for setting things on fire. And I'm like, wow, really? No. Now, is the anger behind the act coming from a place of real deep pain, yes, but how I respond to that pain, I'm still looking to scripture, not looking to the world.
Right.
But I understand I'm not going to also demonize all those that are hurting and responding in a way that hurt people are responding. I'm going to respond in the way that God, like, I'm no way justifying looting. Don't do it. When there was a march in Azusa, I was the first one that was like, when we go by my church, I'm going to stand in front of it and be like, Black owned, man. Like, don't do it. Like, and I would stand to the restaurant next to me, which is La Toteca, with wonderful people that go to my church and say, don't you dare. Brown owned, white owned, doesn't matter, doesn't make it right. Let's not tear things down.
But in all fairness, I think if people looted La Toteca, all the white people would be up in arms too, man. I mean,
it's really good.
We don't get those chips and salsa. What are we going to do?
Really good. And I'll be the first one to say, like, nobody's business do I want to see
of course
ravaged.
These are not Christian values. They're not gospel values.
No. But what I want to also point is what we're seeing is a community respond by saying, hey, and this is something I have to check my heart with. Like, I don't anyway support that. But if I find myself being more upset by a business in Beverly Hills being looted than the fact that a Black man lost his life, what is that about?
Right, yeah. It's a good question.
A building can be restored. Those material things can be renewed. A man lost his life. I'm not justifying the looting. Hear my heart. Wrong, bad, not for it, not okay. Mm-hmm. But I would, as a Black man in this community, like to see people just as enraged about the fact that someone like me lost his life over $20 as I'd like to see the same amount of passion and enragement about that injustice as I am as seeing about some people over a athletic shoe shop that has been looted.
And it almost, to me, like, the injustice of all of the looting isn't just in the stupidity of like breaking into store, stealing everything. It's almost that, like, we have this moment of sharing, like, as a culture, this cultural moment of sharing what happened and saying, look, and everybody's looking at the George Floyd killing and saying, wow, this isn't right. And then the narrative shifts. And to me, that's almost the bigger injustice. It's like, who's George Floyd again? The narrative has now shifted. The media has now shifted. Everything is shifted towards the looting and all that stuff. And it's like, no, that's just a certain segment of people. They're black, white, brown. They are just a certain segment of people that is like, they see chaos and they go running. How do we get the narrative back on, what happened to George Floyd and all that? That's one of the bigger injustices of that, is that the looting further marginalized George Floyd.
Yep. The demonic nature of racism began to distract from the issue of true injustice, to move it to another issue that is also unjust, but takes away from the whole reason why we find ourselves in this position as a nation, as a globe in the first place.
No, I totally agree.
Heartbreaking. There's always going to be opportunistic people that are going to take advantage of people's of where we're at, where we're the same and where we're different. And anyway.
Well, man, I want to respect your time. We're almost coming up on time here, so I want to just ask you, let me ask you a couple lightning round questions, like just super fast, first thing that pops into your mind, and then we're going to end with the church. So first thing, what do you wish just all white people knew? If you could just say, like, I wish all white people knew this, what would it be?
That when I'm sharing about how I've been mistreated due to the racism that I face, that I'm telling the truth, I'm not lying. Like, we just believe me.
Yeah.
And stand with me.
Yeah.
Oftentimes in those situations, you'll hear that, but sometimes I kind of get treated like that? Or is it possible that like but and so when
The
people,
Irish were slaves. I mean,
yeah,
that's the classic one. I've seen it come back up again. Did you know the Irish were enslaved? And it's like, dude, do you know history? Yes, there was indentured servitude in the Irish, and it was not at all the same as American slavery. So please stop posting that.
yeah,
Like, not even remotely close if you read your history.
yeah, just like I'd want them just to understand that it's coming from a place of deep pain,
Yeah.
and we want to be believed. That's one of the common things that as this has all come up, and I've been able to gauge in more of these conversations, people have been saying like, "Hey, I never knew. You never said anything." Like it's like, who doesn't want to? You get tired of not feeling believed after so long.
Wow. And people just, that is what so dramatically, one of these conversations, the conversation that actually come out before this one, is a conversation I have with my friend Troy. And the reason why I'm so passionate about this and why I dove into is I walked through an airport. I experienced his racism, the racism towards him, walking with him for a day and just realizing, holy cow, the world is different for him. Everything, the world is completely different for him than it is for me. And it was just this mind-opening, eye-opening experience. So I believe you. I hope other people are listening and just believing you, and you're able to share these stories even more. And, I just hope your platform increases because people need to hear these stories. Let me ask you this. Same question, but for Black people. What do you wish all Black people knew?
What I wish all Black people knew in terms of,
and I know we're like breaking cardinal rules here. We're like generalizing, like,
yeah.
And we're just gonna go for it because it's, like, just in your experience, like, the reason why I'm asking this question is because you kind of live in an in-between world, right? Like, you're pastoring a multi-ethnic church. You've got a family that's multi-ethnic. You've lived in communities that are primarily white, schools that are primarily white, and you also have, a large voice in the Black community. So you're kind of in between both worlds. Just throwing that question out.
Yeah. I would encourage all my Black brothers and sisters to posture themselves in a way that those that are, as I kind of alluded to earlier as in our talk, people have questions. People want to know what to say and how to support them. And if we just posture ourselves as a, like, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt that you're for me, that you love me, that you want the best for me, I think more of conversations like these can happen. Like, I remember getting, after all this thing happened, like some people on my staff calling me and saying like, wait, so do I post this? And if I post this and I'm for you, but then I'm hearing that silence is racism, so I don't want to be silent, but then I say something and one word is wrong, and now someone's saying I'm a racist, I'm not woke enough, I don't get it. Pastor, just tell me what to say. I'll say it. I just want you to know I love you, I respect you, I honor you, you're a man of God, I don't know what to do, tell me what to do. I'm so afraid because this issue is so volatile. So I'm like, I want to say to all Black people, like those within the community, like, hey, can we just believe that those that are coming to us for direction or for counsel, that they're for us, and just be open to not jumping to conclusions or jumping to judgment about what somebody else is in terms of throwing a name at them or calling them this or calling them that. Let's not do that. That's not moving the ball further down the field. Let's just say, hey, if you got a question, ask it, and I'm going to believe the best in you, and I'm going to ask you to do the same.
Yeah. All right. So that's awesome. Assuming that we all have the best intentions in mind is so helpful. Let me ask you this. Let's say that you get to go to an arena, and it's, this is assuming COVID-19 doesn't exist, but you get to go to this arena and there's like 10,000 white pastors, and you get to speak directly into the white church. What would you tell the church that's primarily white? What do you wish they would say? What do you wish they knew? What message would you give them?
See me as a child of God, first and foremost, who is Black. And that's okay.
Yeah.
It kind of goes to that. And I was raised in the 90s. I get it. The whole color blindness and we don't see color. And that was a thing. I make a joke. There's a 90s group called In Vogue, and they had a lyric, "Be colorblind, don't be so shallow." And I was like, so we all were praying for that.
It's like that right now.
Right? It's like, but what the reality is we're not colorblind. And I don't believe, based on what I find in scripture, that was God's intention, because he made us with the color that we are. We get revelations and we hear every tribe, every tongue, every nation. So who we are and the beautiful way that God created us is important to God. And so to say that I only see you and everyone as a child of God, and that ethnicity, race, and color doesn't matter, I really feel is like doing a disservice to the beautiful creator that we have. I can see you, Dave, and I see you as a man of God, a brother in the kingdom. And I'm like, yes, we're walking this road together. And you're white. And that's okay. It doesn't take away from me being Black, but it does inform me about the different experiences that you have in life, and allows me to care for you in a very personal way. So what I would say to all, like, my Black and white, my white brothers in the faith and my white sisters in the faith, is it's okay to see me as a man of God who is Black, and let that inform the way that we respond to each other in love. That's okay. That's not mistreatment. That's not injustice unless you make it. That is our way of celebrating the diversity that God has created in his people.
Awesome. Well, man, let's just finish this up on the local church. You and I are both pastors of a local church. What is kind of, we ask this all the time in the church, what can we do? Like, what do we do, man? What do we do? And I don't really even know where to go from there, just other than say, what do we do? What is the vision that we ought to be portraying? Like, where do we go from here?
I think that with, like, in many ways that I perceive it, that God has given me a gift. I didn't know, I'll speak within my own church context, that we were not standing unified in the way that I feel like is helpful and becoming more of the body of Christ that God has called the church to be. When it comes to the evil of racism, I didn't know that there is such division as I do now. And as rough as that is to swallow, I find myself thanking God for it, because I believe now we can move forward and see God's will be done on earth as it is in heaven in his people, now that it's been revealed to where we really are at. So what exactly does all that mean? What does that mean, Pastor? What does that have to do with what can we do? What can we do? I think we're doing it in a conversation like this.
Yeah.
Can we hear each other's stories? Can we listen? Can we mourn with those who mourn? Can we be in the pain with one another? But I believe that it can't just stop at a conversation. It has to move towards some sort of advocacy for righteousness in the kingdom.
Yeah.
Like, we have to be on the side of Jesus. And the sheer fact is, if there's anyone within the body that is hurting or being treated unjustly or unfairly, that should be not okay with everyone in the body.
Yeah.
We want to see everyone treated with the same level of love, care, and candor that God wants us all to. I think of what it says in the Gospel of John: "A new commandment I give you, to love one another." And I found myself saying, like, man, you're saying a new commandment. Isn't this an old commandment? And I think in this season, it's a new commandment again. Like, how are we truly loving one another?
Yeah.
What's that really looking like?
Well, and in the body of Christ, like, the whole idea, and I think Paul brings this up too, is like, hey, if somebody's hurting, you ought to feel it. Like, what's the disconnect when the white community can't, like, there's a whole other ecosystem of church out there called, like, the African-American church. It's primarily Black. And when they're in pain, why doesn't the white church feel that pain as well? So
Yeah. And the one falsehood that I keep hearing is that like, if the church stands on the issue of Black Lives Matter, it's adding to the division within the church. And I honestly think the opposite is true. This is the church's finest hour. If we can stand unified with the understanding that the Black community matters and that there is unjust treatment to my Black brothers and sisters, and as part of the body, I will not stand for it. I will stand with them. I will see God's kingdom come on this side to the best of my ability. What is more unifying than that?
Yeah. Amen.
It doesn't have to be divisive. It can be very unifying. What makes it divisive, I think, I'm playing my hand here, is when somehow we think if we elevate one, we somehow bring down another. And it's almost like I find myself, again, I'll share within my own church context. I want to say, come on, guys. Like, it's like when I tell my kids, like, hey, good job. You got a 4.0. This is great. You're amazing. And one of my kids says, what about me? How come you didn't like? By me saying I'm elevating and I'm encouraging someone who needs that encouragement, there's no way that take away from you. Like, it makes me think of the prodigal son. It's like, I've always been here with you. You didn't slaughter the fatted calf for me. Where's my ring? Where's my coat? Says the older brother. And the father is saying, like, everything I have is yours.
So what you're saying is that it's selfish and childish.
It's
I
selfish.
mean, not to put words in your mouth.
No, I'm glad you went there. I'm trying to be kind, man. I'm trying to be kind.
No, but just it is what it is. Like, that's what it's selfish. It's childish. I mean, my kids do the same thing. Oh, good job. You did this. And the other ones are like, what about me? You know, like, well, they're just being kids. And look what we're doing in our society.
Yeah. We're a church. We can do better. And I will end with this, like this, this bracelet. I didn't even plan on talking about this. I don't know if you see it. It's a band. And it simply says, I can do better. I got this from a white pastor in Arizona. His name is Darren Nibelink. And he shared a message with me after the whole Ahmaud Arbery thing happened. How heartbroken he was to see that this young man's life was taken for no faults of his own. And as a white pastor, he called me, he'd been talking to me. He's like, man, we've been having those conversations. What can you do? What can I do? And he found himself with tears streaming down his cheeks saying, I didn't know. We can do better. I can do better. Like, I can do better. And so he had these bands printed up for his whole church, just saying, will you join me in taking your personal responsibility for what you can do? Like, I can do better. And so I asked him for one. And of course, like a true pastor, he sent me a couple hundred. And I was like, you can't outbless me, brother. I'm gonna find a way to bless you back. And I passed it on to my church this past Sunday, saying, hey, what if we all just committed to combating acts of hate with acts of love and admitted that just as a church, I can do better. I can love better. I can care better. I can stand more strongly with those that are hurting and in pain.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's a great message to kind of conclude us with and wrap up our time. Man, how can people find you if you want them to find you? Yeah, on Instagram. We'll put your stuff down there. How can people find you? What's your social stuff so people can get in contact with you if they want?
Absolutely. It's Pastor Anthony is, I believe, my Instagram. Really, Anthony at redeemedlife.church. That's my email. I'm giving you all my stuff. You can find me on redeemedlife.church on the website. That's my church website. But it's really Pastor Anthony Powell on all my Facebook, social media, and you'll be able to find me there.
Awesome, man.
Hey, continue.
Dude, this has just been so helpful. And I just want to thank you so much for coming on with me and having these conversations. And I believe God's going to use them for his glory and his kingdom and to do stuff in his church. I think, like you said, the time is now, and we need to do something in this time, and we can all do better. So thank you very much.
Man, and thank you again for engaging in this conversation, for doing the great work that you're doing, for being a brother to me and a friend to me during this whole time, and letting me know that you are standing with me and that my life does matter. That means more than you can ever know, Pastor D.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Well, I love you, man. And we'll talk to you soon.